The champagne glass was still in my hand when my stepdaughter looked directly at me and said, "Here's to the loser who signs the checks, but will never be my real dad." The room went silent. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I simply placed a small brass key on the table. Her grandfather saw it. He read the note attached to it, and all the color drained from his face. "Sarah," he whispered, "tell me you didn't. My name is Daniel Carter. For 17 years, I believed I knew what family meant. I was wrong." It started on a warm Saturday evening in Scottsdale, Arizona. My wife, Sarah, had arranged a celebration for her daughter, Emily's 21st birthday. There were 30 people in the backyard, family, friends, neighbors. Fairy lights hung from the trees, music played softly, and my wife had spent days preparing Emily's favorite lemon cake. I had paid for almost everything: the house, the food, the university tuition, the first car Emily drove, even the little apartment she moved into during college. I never complained. Because when I married Sarah 17 years earlier, Emily was 4 years old. Her biological father had disappeared before she could even spell his name, so I stepped in. I taught her how to ride a bike. I stayed awake when she had nightmares. I sat through every school play. I held her hand outside the emergency room when she broke her wrist. And when she graduated high school, I cried harder than anyone. I never called her my stepdaughter. I called her my daughter. But that night, something changed. After dinner, Emily stood and lifted her champagne glass. "To the people who actually made me who I am." She smiled, then her eyes landed on me. "And, of course," she laughed, "to the loser who signs the checks." A few people chuckled nervously. "But will never be my real dad." My wife Sarah froze. "Emily," she whispered. But Emily wasn't finished. "You know what, Daniel? I appreciate everything you've paid for." She shrugged. "But money doesn't make you family." I stared at her. 17 years of memories suddenly felt like photographs from somebody else's life. Then Emily raised her glass again. "To my real family." She clinked glasses with her biological father, a man who had walked back into her life only 6 months earlier. His name was Mark, and somehow overnight he had become the hero. I looked at Sarah. She couldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than Emily's words. Because Sarah knew exactly what I had sacrificed. I quietly put my glass down. Then I reached into my jacket and placed the brass key on the table. Emily frowned. "What's that?" I looked at her. "Something that belongs to your family." Then I walked away. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. It was Emily's grandfather, Richard. He picked up the key. There was a folded note attached to it. He read the first line. His expression changed instantly. "Daniel." I stopped at the back door. Richard's voice cracked. "Where did you get this?" I turned around. "Ask your daughter." Sarah suddenly stood. "Dad, don't." Richard looked at her. "Sarah," his hands were shaking. "Tell me you didn't." Nobody understood what he meant. But I did, because 6 months earlier, I had discovered something that changed everything. Sarah had secretly borrowed against our family trust. Not a small amount. $280,000. The money was supposed to fund Emily's education and secure her future. Instead, Sarah had transferred it to an account connected to Mark. When I confronted her, she cried. She told me Mark was struggling. She said Emily needed her biological father in her life, and I believed her, because I loved my wife. So I quietly paid off the debt myself. I never told Emily, I never told Richard, I simply protected Sarah. But then I discovered the second is betrayal. The money wasn't the worst part. Sarah and Mark had been planning something much bigger. They wanted control of the family property in downtown Phoenix. A commercial building worth nearly $4 million. It had belonged to Richard. Years earlier, he had transferred ownership into a protected family trust. And there was one condition. The property could never be sold without my signature, because Richard had added me as trustee after I saved his business during a financial crisis. Sarah knew that, Mark knew that, and apparently, they had decided I was the obstacle. That's when the key became important. It wasn't a house key. It opened the trust's private records room. The note attached to it contained one sentence. "Everything you need to know is inside." Richard looked at Sarah. "You told me the trust was untouched." Sarah's lips trembled. "Dad, you told me Daniel was trying to take Emily's inheritance." I watched my wife lower her head. Then Mark suddenly stepped forward. "This is ridiculous." I looked at him. "You should probably leave." He laughed. "You don't own this family." "No," I replied. But apparently I was the only one protecting it. Richard grabbed the note again. His eyes moved across the final paragraph. Then he whispered, "Oh God." I knew exactly what he'd found. The security footage. 3 months earlier, Sarah and Mark had entered the trust office after midnight. They had tried to remove the original documents. They believed the cameras were disconnected. They weren't. Richard looked at his daughter as if he didn't recognize her. You were going to steal your own daughter's inheritance? Sarah began crying. No, I interrupted. You weren't stealing it from Emily. Everyone looked at me. You were stealing it from me. Sarah's face collapsed, and then came the final twist. I told Richard something I'd never told anyone. I had already resigned as trustee. 3 weeks earlier. The key wasn't the important part, the note was. It contained a letter from my attorney explaining that the trust had been transferred into an independent fiduciary structure. Neither Sarah nor Mark could touch it. Not the property, not the accounts, not Emily's education fund. Nothing. Sarah stared at me. You planned this? No, I shook my head. I planned to save my family. Her eyes filled with tears. Daniel, please. I looked at the woman I had loved for 17 years. Sarah, I could forgive Emily. She started crying harder. But I don't know if I can forgive you. Emily suddenly stepped forward. Daniel. For the first time that night, her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded like a little girl, the same little girl who used to call me when she was afraid of thunderstorms. I didn't mean it. I looked at her. You did. She wiped her tears. I was angry. I know. I thought Mark was finally giving me the father I never had. I swallowed. And I thought I was the father you already had. Emily broke down. She walked toward me, then stopped. I'm sorry. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, I opened my arms. She stepped into them, and I held her. Not because what she had done was okay, but because 17 years of love don't disappear because of one terrible sentence. Behind us, Richard quietly told Mark to leave. Mark protested. Richard pointed toward the gate. You came here looking for money. He glanced at Emily. But Daniel came here carrying your family for 17 years. Mark left. Sarah stayed. She stood alone beneath the backyard lights, and for the first time, she looked like a stranger. 3 months later, Sarah and I separated. There was no screaming, no revenge, no public humiliation. Just paperwork, counseling, and 2 people finally admitting that love cannot survive where trust has been buried. Emily continued therapy. She also started paying her own bills. She got a job at a local design firm, and every Sunday, she came over for dinner. Sometimes, we talked, sometimes, we didn't, but slowly something changed. One evening she placed an envelope beside my plate. What's this? I asked. She smiled sadly. It's the first payment. For what? She looked down. For everything I called a check. I pushed the envelope back. You don't owe me money, Emily. I know. She looked into my eyes. I owe you respect. That was the moment I finally smiled. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Some wounds take years. But family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's the person who stays when everyone else leaves. The person who pays the bill without asking for applause. The person who protects your future, even after you've broken his heart. And sometimes, the person you call a loser turns out to be the only one who never lost sight of what mattered. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below.